Hey, Brian Kelly here from Zombie Guitar. Here in this video I want to talk about the 3 reasons that chord tone targeting is not quite as difficult as you may think it is. So what do I mean by chord tone targeting? Well, anytime you're soloing, there's always going to be a 2-layer approach. The first layer is going to be the scale. The second layer is going to be the chord tones. So if you're soloing over a chord progression in which all of the chords are part of just one single key, the scale that you're going to use is going to be just one single scale. That's going to be the key scale of the chord progression. The second layer, the thing that you're going to do on a per chord basis, is going to be to target the chord tones within the scale. So there's always going to be that 2-layer approach, the scale and then the chord tones. So if you're soloing over a chord progression in which all the chords are part of the key of A minor, then the scale that you're going to use is going to be the A minor scale. You may know your A minor scale very well. You may be able to play, all the various different patterns up and down the entire neck of the guitar, and everything's more or less going to sound good because everything's going to be in key. But the thing that really is going to take your playing to the next level is going to be the chord tone targeting part. That's the layer 2 part. That's where you focus on the chord tones within the scale on a per chord basis. So the best sounding notes within the scale on a per chord basis are going to be the chord tones. So I've made a ton of other videos on this concept before. Feel free to look back at my old videos. I'll even post a link to a couple of them below. But really, this is like the thing that a lot of players are looking for. And once they figure this whole chord tone targeting concept out, it's really the thing that takes them from, like an intermediate level to like the professional level. Like seriously, chord tone targeting is that powerful. But the problem is that it can be very difficult. It can be very overwhelming. So as you're soloing, as you're playing up and down the neck of the guitar, not only do you have to, know the scale patterns no matter where you happen to be on the neck, but you're also expected to kind of know specific notes within the scale as the chords are changing. And the chords are changing pretty fast, too. So a lot of people, they realize the importance of this chord tone targeting thing, but they get very overwhelmed by it, and they don't know how they can ever be expected to, think fast enough to on a per chord basis to be able to keep up with the chord changes. Well, that's what this video is for. It's not quite as difficult as you think, so I'm going to give you my 3 reasons why. So let's look at why that is. So reason number 1 is what I call the 50% method. So as I said, the scale is going to be layer number 1, the chord tones are going to be layer number 2. So let's use the key of A minor as the example for this lesson. So the key scale for the key of A minor is going to be A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Those are going to be the 7 notes that are part of the scale. Those 7 notes form all these different patterns up and down the neck that you can use as your soloing framework for layer 1. So for layer 2, what you're going to do on a per chord basis is going to be to focus on the chord tones of each of the underlying chords. So for the A minor chord, you focus on the A, C, and E within the scale. Let's say our chord progression is A minor, F major, G major. So over the F major chord, you're going to focus on the notes F, A, and C. Over the G major chord, you're going to focus on the notes G, B, and D. All of the chord tones of each chord are also part of the key scale, but those are just going to be the best sounding notes within the scale. So 3 of the 7 notes are going to be the best sounding notes to play on a per chord basis. 3 out of 7 is roughly 50%. It's a little bit less than 50%, but you could say it's roughly 50%. So if you want to focus on more than just the triad tones, if you want to focus on the 7th variation of each chord, then you now have 4 notes to focus on. So 4 out of 7 notes for each chord. So 4 out of 7 is now more than 50%. So over the A chord, the 7th variation would be an A minor 7. Over the F chord, the 7th variation would be a F major 7. Over the G chord, the 7th variation becomes a G dominant 7th. Those are all the 7th chords, the diatonic 7th chords within this key. So over the A minor chord, you now have A, C, and E, and then you have the G also. Over the F major chord, you have F, A, and C, and then you also have the E. Over the G major chord, you have G, B, and D, and you also have the F. So if you're focusing on the 7th variation of each chord, you have a 4/7 chance. If you're just focusing on the triad tone, you have a 3/7 chance. This is why I call it the 50% method. It's roughly 50%. So let's look at the fretboard here. Let's look at a scale pattern and see how this actually applies. So let's just look at this pattern right here. This is going to be the A minor scale in just this one little area of the fretboard, 4th to 8th fret. Of course, you can use any pattern that you want up and down the entire neck of the guitar, but just for the sake of this lesson, we're just going to kind of focus right here. So over the A minor chord, the triad tones are going to be A, C, and E. So that's a lot of the notes. That's 3 out of 7. You have a 3/7 chance of landing on a triad tone. So if you're right here on this note, that's not a chord tone, that's not a triad tone. But if you move one scale note up, you are on a chord tone. If you move one scale note down, you are on a chord tone. So if you're here on this note, so that is not a chord tone, but if you move one scale note here, then you are on a chord tone. If you move up to here, well, that's not a triad tone, but that's still going to be, that's going to be the note that makes the A minor 7 chord, A, C, E, and G. So G is going to be the 7th. So the 7th isn't going to be as strong as the triad tones. 7ths aren't always going to be as strong as the triad tones on a per chord basis, but it can still sound good. So, you have either a 3/7 chance of getting it right within this pattern, or a 4/7 chance if you're also considering 7ths to be chord tones as well. So then when you switch to the F major chord, you have F, A, and C. Those are all your triad tones. If you're also considering the 7th, which would be the note E, so F, A, and C is the triad, E would be your 7th to make the major 7th chord. So you also have an E here and an E here. So that's either 3/7 of a chance if you're focusing on triad tones, or 4/7 of a chance if you're also including the 7th. So that makes things a little bit easier. Same thing for the G major chord. The G major chord, you have the notes G, B, and D, which make up your triad. Then you can also include the note F, because that's the 7th. So here's an F here, here's an F here. So reason number 2 is that less is more. So I'm sure you've heard that expression before. Well, that definitely applies to the fretboard. It definitely applies to soloing. So one of the best examples of this concept would be David Gilmour. David Gilmour is probably my favorite guitar player of all time. Dave Gilmour, he'll just take a little chunk of the fretboard, like he may just take like 5 notes or so, or 4 notes or whatever, just a little chunk of one of the scale patterns, and he'll just bend, maybe half-step bends, whole step, 1.5-step bends, whole slide, whole hammer. He'll do all kinds of stuff, as Dave Gilmour does, and the solo will just sound amazing. But in reality, he's just kind of noodling in just a small little area. He takes all of this stuff, this whole scale, and he just confines it to this one little area, and he makes that one little area sound great. And of course he does so by also targeting chord tones. So even though you're playing just a small little area of the fretboard, you still have the whole chord tone. You're either on a chord tone or you're not on a chord tone. If you land on a chord tone, it's going to sound great over the chord. If you don't land on a chord tone, it's not going to quite sound as good. It could sound good, that may be the sound that you're going for, but you're either going to be on a chord tone or you're going to be off a chord tone. So take this whole less is more concept, combine it with the whole 50% chance of getting it right, 50% chance of landing on a chord tone, combine those two concepts together, and things get much, much simpler. So let's go back and look at the scale pattern again that we looked at previously. So this is our area of focus right here between the 4th and the 8th fret. We can even further reduce this to just the high 3 strings if we want to. So this is our new soloing framework. So of course you can use any chunk of any pattern that you want. This is just the chunk that I'm choosing for this lesson. So you just have this little soloing range right here. Of course, you can bend any notes you want if you want to achieve other scale notes that are out of this pattern, but just kind of keeping your fingers right here in this area, things get a lot simpler. So reason number 3 is that your ear is the best guide that you can possibly have. So you probably already knew this, you're probably already doing this. If you're just used to soloing up and down the neck, using the scale patterns, playing in key, but not necessarily focusing on chord tones, because that is still a thing that seems, complicated for you. You're probably already chord tone targeting without even realizing it. Why? Because your ear tells you when something is the note or not the note. So more often than not, the note that's going to sound perfect to your ear is going to be a chord tone. So you're already doing this. So now that you have this other knowledge, what we talked about in the last 2 reasons, knowing that you have roughly a 50% chance of being on a chord tone, 50% chance of not being on a chord tone, plus combining that with the fact that you can just kind of pick a little chunk of the scale and you can play there as long as you want. You can play a full solo just using a small little area of the fretboard. And, knowing those 2 things, plus knowing that your ear is going to tell you yes or no. Chord tone yes, chord tone no. If chord tone no, you move 1 scale note in either direction and then it becomes a chord tone yes. So your ear is your guide. So you're already doing this. Your ear has already been telling you this stuff. Combine that with the previous 2 things, and it makes chord tone targeting as, a holistic concept much, much simpler. So your ear is going to be your best guide. So that's reason number 3. So short little video today. Just wanted to give some quick tips about this whole chord tone targeting concept. I know a lot of people, they like the concept. They realize the importance of it, but they get overwhelmed by it. So if you can kind of simplify things as much as possible, that's what I'm trying to do here in this video. So hopefully you guys found this helpful. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.